Alright, so we are live. A little bit of technical difficulties here on my end, but you can hear the fan in the background. I'm sorry. I did the best I could. It was either I couldn't hear me or I could slightly hear the fan, so I tried to adjust the settings as much as I could. Alright, welcome, either way, welcome to HUMANe Mind Live, episode 128. I already got one of my stories pulled up. Had that open for the testing. Giving away the whole show. While I haven't even gone over the topics to discuss. Completely unprofessional here. Alright, so that was the first story there. Jumped the gun a little bit, although there's not really much to say unless you're not familiar with the Roger Stone story, but that's okay. So that's the first topic I'll be talking about, which is just a stone's throw away. The second story I will be going over, and this is the title for the episode, Little Trouble in Big China. Then I will be talking about the Mockdown, the Turing Flex. Wait, Turing Flex. Was that? That was... There was something in there that made sense at the time when I wrote that, but I'm not remembering what it was. Something Flex. Turing... Oh. It rhymes with Turing test, but not really. Okay. I was like, man, that doesn't make any sense. Why did I write Turing Flex? Maybe I was thinking maybe for a second there that should have been a different title. I do have one other story that I'm gonna slip in there whenever I feel like it, but it's not worth giving it its own title. Alright, so the first story here, which is pretty amazing.
Breaking news, Roger Stone breathing a huge sigh of relief tonight because the White House has just announced the president will commute his sentence. He was set to go to prison on Tuesday, and now Roger Stone will not go to prison because President Trump has commuted his sentence. Short of a full pardon, but still it means that Roger Stone will stay out of the who's gown. More on that as it comes in.
Alright, so the first thing is, his sentence was commuted, so he's not going to jail. People have been speculating there's two things involved here. The president could have just given him a full pardon. And so people who are anti-Trump and anti-conservative and all that, they look at that and like, oh, he wasn't pardoned, so he's still guilty of the crime. Well, the crimes that he supposedly committed were lying to Congress and certain things along those lines, but the actual... So first off, even if he had lied to Congress, as they're saying he did, which he contests he did not, what he said was the truth, and the other people were the ones lying and committing perjury, and that he's got proof, but the judge denied the evidence to the contrary. He's got all kinds of evidence to support his side, the dates where he had information, the people he was talking to, what he knew at the time versus what the judge and what other people are saying he knew at the time. But when the judge was doing the trial, they had a gag order on Roger Stone and on his attorneys. They couldn't discuss anything. They couldn't go to the Court of Public Appeals, and yet everybody attacking him was going out in front of the news. They were broadcasting their stories. That was being discussed nonstop. Members of the jury were obviously tainted. He talks about that on various interviews, that members of the jury that were supposed to be kind of nonpartisan, or not necessarily nonpartisan, but it's supposed to be kind of like a balance, and yet the jury pool was all stacked against him. People who, like the people that were part of the, so one of the people that was a part of the jury pool was blatantly had a statement that said all Trump supporters are racist on either Twitter or Facebook or something like that. But that individual had hidden this social media from the defense attorneys that that help pick the jury pool, right? So this person was hiding their true intentions, and then when this information came to light that this member of the jury was was not what they were claiming to be, and actually were very partisan against Roger Stone, the judge claimed that the individual probably didn't even know who Roger Stone was and had no way of knowing if he was a Trump supporter, even though, like, which is very doubtful to begin with. But even if she didn't know who he was before the trial, she would have found out who he was during the trial, and if she's already biased against him and thinks he's a racist, she's just gonna vote guilty. Because, this guy's, he's a Trump supporter, alright. Like, this is... I know that it's impossible to find an unbiased jury, but when you have somebody who's outspokenly biased, but they hide it from you, and then when it's brought to light, instead of just, we need to redo the jury selection or whatever it is, they're like, no, that's not going to impact this case whatsoever. Really? No way that's going to impact this case? There's just so many fraudulent things going on in that case. So, there's the second aspect of this. So, Trump merely commuted his sentence. Trump did not pardon him. And people are saying, that's because Trump knows he's guilty or whatever it is. But had Trump pardoned him, Roger Stone would be unable to clear his name on his own. And right now, Roger Stone, because his sentence was commuted, is filing for appeal. He's going to appeal the decision against him, and he's going to fight and prove his innocence now that you can hopefully get a judge that doesn't have a unconstitutional gag order against the defense, doesn't have an unconstitutional rejection of admissible evidence in court. There were so many things that he could not use in his defense because the judge threw them out as evidence, even if they're credible evidence. Even if it supports his claim, and it's like, without this, without this, yeah, it's gonna look like he's guilty. It's gonna look like he was lying, even when he's telling the truth, because the information you have is factually incorrect, and he wasn't allowed to straighten out the record. That's just ridiculous. He's got proof that other people that were testifying against him were lying, and yet he wasn't able to admit his evidence, and instead the court took the other person's testimony as valid evidence against Stone. That's absolute insanity. If somebody says this person murdered my uncle, and then it turns out that person wasn't even in a state at the time, couldn't have possibly be a witness of this, and you go and submit that evidence, and the judge is like, oh, no, you can't submit that evidence. We're going to use this person's eyewitness testimony against you. That's, like, that is the definition of kangaroo court, and, like, this is, maybe not definition of kangaroo court, but this is, what's that, it's a Russian show trial, right? Where they had a court case, granted, this is a case where it's, alright, I was gonna bring up an analogy, because it's never mind, that's not a apt analogy, but, so the Russian court cases, or whatever, where they brought somebody before trial, like, we're giving them a fair trial, and then completely railroaded them, and then, the person didn't have an actual offense, and the trial itself was just for show to make it look like they're doing things by the book. And that's what this was. That's a more apt analogy than what I was thinking. Anyway, so it's a good thing he got his sentence commuted, so he's not going to jail. That's the other crazy thing, is he was talking about on interviews before his sentence was commuted, and, before it, and when he was about to go into jail, is he's in his 70s. He is an at-risk category. He's already got health issues that would put him further at risk of COVID, and he was going into the jail system as governors were releasing criminals because of the COVID scares. Like, releasing people with violent crime on their record, releasing them into the public, and at the same time, he's going to jail? It's completely backwards. He could have served out his entire sentence on house arrest, and there are many people in his age group, but also, like, first-time offenders, people with not a house arrest, but instead they wanted to send him to prison for several months. It was, like, I think 40 months, which is over 3 years. And the crimes that he was charged with were very minimal procedural crimes, if he even committed them. That's ridiculous. Alright. No, the other thing is this information that came out after the fact. He does talk about this on a lot of interviews that he was on. So what General Flynn was allowed to do as part of his case, which ended up getting his court case, the case against him thrown out, was he was allowed to question the manner in which he was investigated. And that is a allowable defense if the cops are coming at you and the way they're coming at you is illegal. The whole case gets thrown out. This is one of those things. This is why they had to go after Al Capone for tax evasion, because they knew he was guilty of other crimes and they had evidence against him. But the way that some of that evidence was obtained was illegally. So they had illegally obtained evidence against him for his other crimes, his racketeering and his selling of alcohol during Prohibition. They had proof of it, they had documentation, but it was inadmissible in court because it was obtained illegally, and had they gone to a trial, Al Capone could have gotten the entire case thrown out and could have been found not guilty of the charges because the evidence was obtained illegally or was obtained under falsified reports, or in Roger Stone's case, to make this more applicable, the entire investigation into the Trump campaign was based on a document that the people who were doing the investigation knew was factually incorrect, knew was insufficient as a source or as a reason to start the investigation to begin with. And yet they doctored records in order to get the investigation going. And when the investigation hit roadblocks, they further did unlawful things in order to continue the investigation. And that's what was brought forward in the General Flynn investigation. And had they not started off the investigation via illegal means, had they not continued the investigation via illegal means, then they would have never gotten to Roger Stone. But instead, they started it on illegal means, kept it going via illegal means, and then got to Roger Stone. And by that time, it can be argued whether he was making statements because he knew this was an unlawful investigation and he was trying to protect himself and as many people as he could from further abuse of the justice system. That's not so the claim that Roger Stone is going with is that he was innocent and he made no false statements and there's nothing they were demanding that he turn over evidence against Trump, and because he wouldn't, they instead insisted that meant he had evidence that he was hiding. And he's insisting, I can't say what isn't true. If you want me to testify against Trump for something he's done, I don't have any information to testify in that regard. I don't know anything. There is nothing to testify. I don't have it. And yet, for some reason, the prosecution against him insisted that he knew more and he knew all this. It's so backwards. The whole situation is messed up. It's a good thing that he got commuted. He's not going to jail, and now he has a chance to appeal the decision, and hopefully justice will be on his side this time. And it's just exposing how corrupt this system is and how left-leaning a lot of the judges and a lot of the prosecution, a lot of people in the Department of Justice, how they're just doing anything to try to forward a democratic agenda at the expense of the country and at the expense of, like, man, these things that they're doing right now. It's a good thing that the current administration, for the most part, is trying to do everything by the book and legally, but based on everything that that they have done to him in this administration, the next Republican administration that comes into power, what's to stop them from using the exact same tactics, abusing all the systems in order to to punish Democrats? Nothing, because the Democrats have opened that door. And they've opened it via illegal means, and yet they aren't cracking down on each other, and they aren't holding each other accountable. And they're instead looking over that blatant, unlawful activity. Alright, here's the main story. So this is from Tucker Carlson, although this story has been going around for a while, and other than these couple of clips, I haven't heard many people talking about this, which is kind of bizarre. Like, I haven't heard, you know, even the people who do daily shows on the internet, you know, Andrew Clavin, The Quartering, you know, Stefan Monalou, a couple other people. Well, actually, I haven't been able to keep up with Stefan Monalou's content because he got kicked off of YouTube, and I spend a lot of my time watching YouTube channels, and not a whole lot of time on library. So I just have YouTube playing in the background while I'm at work, and it just auto plays, and this is how I'll find new information from, you know, new videos and new sources. And I'm not on library all the time, so I'm falling way behind. So I don't know if Monalou has covered this, but other channels that often come up when I'm doing this is Tim Pool. He hasn't covered this either. So this seems very bizarre that this is seeing so little traction. But
a Chinese virologist called Li Mengyan is in hiding tonight after criticizing the Chinese government's duplicitous response to the Wuhan coronavirus. Here's part of what she said to Fox News.
The reason I came to US is because I deliver the message of the truth of COVID-19. If I tell it in Hong Kong, the moment I start to tell it, I will be disappeared and killed. No one can hear me. So for this purpose, I would like to go to US and tell the truth of the origins of COVID-19 to the world, to let people understand how terrible, how dangerous it is. This is nothing about politics. This is a thing about whether all the human in the world can survive.
For telling the truth, the doctor says she'll be, quote, disappeared and killed. This is the government the NBA and so much of corporate America and so many of our politicians suck up to, one that murders doctors for telling the truth. This doctor says Beijing is suppressing vital information about the virus.
There are many patients that don't get treatment on time and diagnosis on time. There is no protection for both doctors and the patient and common people. And also, the government doesn't allow people to release such information. Hospital doctors are scared, but they cannot talk. CDC staffs are scared. I feel very disappointed.
okay, so if you weren't aware of what she's talking about there, she's not talking about people who have died as a result of Chinese suppression of information outside of China. She's talking about people in China right now. There are people in China right now who have COVID and are dying of COVID-like symptoms, and because of China's suppression of information, they are not allowed to report. They are not allowed to test people for it. They are specifically, right, this is the reason, like, this year, China's numbers drop. Like, they were showing all these numbers, it's like, this is their rate of COVID cases, and it dropped to almost zero. And this is the reason why. It doesn't mean the cases are going away. It doesn't mean the deaths are going away. It's they have a gag order on people reporting it. They have a gag order on people testing for it. So people who need treatment and need assistance because they have this condition, they have this virus, are not being treated. So she's got more information than just that. She's got, so this is something that's, this came out, what, a couple of days ago? This is not even July 10th, so this is about less than a week ago that this information came to light, or that this individual came to light, and she says she's got a lot of information to back up what she's saying. One of those things is something that I've been saying on the channel, a lot of other people know about and have been reporting. She's got further proof to support that China knew there was human-to-human transmission weeks or possibly months before they were telling everyone in the world, oh no, there's no human transmission, and the World Health Organization was making the same statement, just taking China at face value, and she's gone on record. She says she's got evidence proving that they knew beforehand. And this person is not just some random Chinese citizen. This person worked with the Chinese, well, they call it CDC, but it's the Chinese version of it. It's the same acronym because it's Chinese Disease Control. I think they brought that, the name of it up previously. But, so she used to work she works, with the WHO and with the CDC, and she's one of she's one of the lower level employees, but she still was in communication chains, still seeing evidence, and still seeing all these. This is not an individual who's on the outside just making this. From what she says about her position, and the FBI is looking to verify the information and all that. That's the other reason why a whole lot of people aren't reporting on this right now. Is her story and claims I'm hearing, and I'm like, yeah, that resonates as true based on the other information we know or the things that we speculated about. This matches up completely with that. So there is that kind of confirmation bias, but she talked about her position that she did hold while she was in China. So I think at the time of this, the clip that Tucker is showing, she was still in China and she was requesting amnesty or sanctuary in the United States in order so that she could make her testimony and make her claims and actually blow the whistle, because she said, yeah, if she said what she knew in Hong Kong or China, yeah, that's the last thing anyone would ever hear from her. So she was petitioning to come to the United States so that way she could say what needed to be said without dying, without being disappeared. So she has gone on a couple of interviews after this, the clip that Tucker is showing here, where she's gone on in more detail about the things that she knows and the things that she can prove. So, I honestly don't think much is going to come from this. It's sad, because this is something that should be like a smoking gun against China, but the fact that it's being so overlooked and it's being so ignored and people are frustrated and focused on so many other things, this is likely to go under the radar for the most part, and China's going to get away with it. And in the meantime, who knows how many hundreds or thousands of people are dying in China right now because of their behavior. So, but I would like to think that eventually this is going to get widespread and there's going to be massive backlash against China, their policies, and how they've handled everything. But odds are no one's going to stand up to China, because right now China is taking over Hong Kong and Taiwan, and they're invading other countries, and the UN and other countries that would normally stop them, would normally do something, sanctions, whatever. Nothing. Nothing is being done against China right now, while China takes over territory that, yeah, it's bad news bears all around when it comes to China. All right, but let's move on to a little more uplifting and upbeat information. Try to focus on the good things, positive things. Okay, so I don't know. You can see over here in this little box that should be visible, right? I think you can see the videos there. Yeah, you can see Kanye's face there. And so this is something I considered talking about last week, but there wasn't very much information. But Kanye did announce his presidential run on July of this year.
And it's gone.
So he announced it on July 4th, and it is July 16th, and it's already over. It lasted 12 days. It's over. It's he was in one poll where he surprisingly ended up polling about 2%, which is right along the lines of the Libertarian Party, which is the only other party that's gotten enough votes to actually mean anything. Although 2% is still not enough to become part of the debates. I think the threshold for that is 3%, maybe 4%. something like that. The Libertarian Party is still not going to get there anytime soon, but one person managed to do more within 12 days than the Libertarian Party. That's sad. Oh, that's the other thing about that. The Libertarian candidate, Jo Jorgensen, I mentioned them previously on these streams. Mentioned her previously on these streams. She came out with a tweet that was saying something along the lines of Black Lives Matter and how we have to be proactive in supporting this initiative, and it's not enough to just not to see race or to treat everybody equally. We have to be black advocates or something along those lines. Yeah, so Tim Pool kind of covered it in his stuff, and he was like, yeah, that's what you're saying. So libertarians' motto is leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone. If we want to work together, we can, but for the most part, I don't have to deal with you, and you don't have to deal with me. But what she was tweeting there is oh, nope, it's not enough to just live and let live. You've got to go and proactively do things for other people, which is the exact opposite of what libertarians believe and stand for. Alright. But yeah, Kanye West not going to be president. Who knew? He's not going to get the nomination in 2020. I know, it's bizarre. It was completely unexpected. Everybody was expecting him to everybody was expecting exactly what happened. What a joke. I got some kind of smudge on my glasses. Alright. Oh, here's another amazing story. So, governors reinstate lockdowns to combat recovering economy. Now, when I first read that, I was like, wait a minute, what? Yeah, and it gets better from there. So this is not a real news article, you can tell from the top. This is from the Babylon Bee, which, if you aren't aware, is a satirical website. It should be painfully obvious. So the U.S. governors across the country have reinstated lockdowns mere weeks after slowly starting to lift them, citing a concerning spike in jobs in the economy. Worried that this increase in job prosperity and happiness would hurt them in November, they reacted to the economic upturn quickly, shutting down businesses and locking people back in their homes. We can't let this economic spike continue, says California Governor Gavin Newsom. That would go against science. The scientists say that locking down an entire population is the best way to prevent dangerous economic spikes. Also, we wanted to mention that this message was brought to you by the Plump Jack Estate Winery. Use code Newsom for 10% off this the next tasting. The governors noticed that people were happier with their lives, glad they could go back to work and reopen their business and having fun outside, unable to tolerate this kind of freedom and general satisfaction with life in the age of Trump. They scrambled to lock back down. We're seeing a concerning rise in the number of people disregarding the government and going on with their lives, says Governor Gretchen Whitmer. If you're outside enjoying yourself or contributing to the economy, I'll get you, my pretty, and your seeds too. Man. Yeah, the whole thing is golden. Babylon Bee, good job. That's an amazing, amazing article there. Alright. So, yeah, I don't really have that much to cover in news this week. There's a couple other stories, but everybody has kind of covered those stories to death, and I didn't feel like making it more just disheartening. And I'm trying to be more optimistic and spread more positivity and good news, or just silly things to laugh at, and focus less and less on the very disturbing and what's the word I'm looking for? Disappointing? Doesn't quite cut it. Just upsetting or demoralizing, I think is more the case. Yeah, there's a lot of news and a lot of information that just makes you lose your faith in humanity or in the future. But that's not reality. Yet it's kind of what, for the most part, the news is oriented around. They love to play on your fears and your anxieties, things that it is very rare to see uplifting stories getting pushed to the forefront. Most of the time, it's tragedy or horror or you know, something to the next craze to be afraid of. This paranoia, whether it's paranoia or whether it's legitimate, but they love to raise phobias. They love to play off of the extremes. And I've heard other people talk about this, and I'm gonna kind of throw my 2 cents on this as well. And there's what they're so there's a kind of a reason why, for the most part, humans focus on the negative, on the scary, because that's how we survive. Because if you ignore the things that could be potentially dangerous to you, that you don't survive, you don't continue, you don't have a family, or your family dies. So, I've talked about Owen Benjamin on this show before, although he's kind of gone off the deep end for me. He's kind of gone too out there in left field. He's taken things to the extreme, and there are certain things that he is claiming that I can't support. But prior to him going down those avenues and being super focused on the Jews and super focused on white people and race and all of that sort of thing, when he was just a standard comedian before he got involved in politics at all, he had a comedy bit where he was talking about caveman survival. And it'd be like, he was talking about women being afraid of everything, because she'd be like, oh, we need some food, and the guy's like, oh, okay, goes out there in his, you know, his caveman cloth with a spear, and he's like, oh, hey, there's a dinosaur, I'm gonna go and try to take down that dinosaur, I bet that's got a lot of meat. Well, he dies, his family starves. That's the end of that line. You know, other guy, she's like, oh, we need some food, go out and get us some food. He's like, you know what, that dinosaur's too far away, I'm too lazy. Oh, hey, there's a bunch of these berries just right outside the cave, I'll pick those. He eats them, he feeds them to his wife, they're poisonous, everybody dies. Next guy, right, another story is like, the guy goes out, she says, oh, we need to get some food. And so the guy goes out, and instead of getting other food, he sees some other woman from another cave, and he goes off, and he starts sleeping with her, and then nobody got food, and they all starve to death, and that line ends. So what ultimately happens is the one wife who's like, hey, who's that, well, who's that B word over there, you stay away from her, hey, no, don't touch that bush, that's not food, go out and get some and then she's like, no, what, not that dinosaur either, he's gonna eat you, you don't have a chance, go take on a deer or something. That's the guy, you know, that's the guy who ends up surviving, right? It just kills a small deer, brings it back, feeds his family, everybody survives. But if you're not looking for those things to be afraid of, right, that's the whole gist of, I mean, I'm probably butchering that. His delivery of it was much better, and he's got music to go with it and all that sort of stuff. And he's got a whole setup or the actual punchline and all that. But the idea rings true in that the people who ignore the potential dangers, the pitfalls, the things that are going to end them, they don't go on to succeed and have offspring and continue their generations. In fact, it's the people who were concerned about their safety, those are the people who went on to succeed and had children, and they taught their children to look out for certain pitfalls and dangers, and it continued for generations. And it's something that we are, not only is it inherent in us to look for these things, but it's also we are raised to look for things and avoid these things, right? Well, I mean, it's not instinctual. We can tell that for certain because little children will run out into the street. Little children will reach for fire. Little children will do things, and then it takes a parent to be like, no, don't do that, that's dangerous. Don't do those things, stay away from those. So we and we start building up these things. Oh, be on the lookout for things that are dangerous. Be on the lookout for things that hurt you. Be on the lookout for things that... And that's necessary for survival. But what media does is they take that they take that survival instinct and they play off of it, and they start promoting these things as, oh, you need to look and be afraid of this. This is not, hey, look both ways before crossing the street. This is the street is made of lava, and if you step one foot on it ever, you're going to burn. They take that rational fear and they take it to an extreme that makes absolutely no sense, but because we are out there looking for pitfalls and trying to avoid them, we focus on that and we're like, ooh, hey, that's terrible. Yeah, we definitely need to avoid that. We can't have, people going outside in the middle of summer when coronavirus has a hard time, because COVID-19 is caused by a coronavirus, and during the summer, coronaviruses die. They don't spread as much. Even if this is a new variant of that, it still has all of the same flaws as a coronavirus. It's not immune to heat and light. But they're like, oh, you can't go out during the summer? That's when, it's like, it's very rare to get a summer cold, and the reason for that is not because the cold disappears, it's because it cannot spread as easily in the heat and cold. Those are terrible environments for it. Anyway, but the media, they play on the fears of spreading contagions, and, everything is going to die, and if we don't do anything in the next 12 years, and they're playing on these fears and taking these rational, practices of looking out for danger and of trying to avoid danger. They take those rational principles and they turn them to irrational phobias. And generally, sometimes phobias are perfectly rational and perfectly sane, but most phobias are irrational. Most phobias are, they are trying to think of what's a really good one. Agoraphobia is one of the craziest ones. It's the fear of going outside because everything outside is dangerous. And I was like, well, some things outside are dangerous, right? Heat stroke is dangerous. Going outside during a lightning storm is dangerous. If you go into certain areas of town, you have a high chance of being mugged or beaten up or killed, depending on where you are. But that doesn't mean that the entire outside is like that. There are places where you can go outside when it's not raining and there's no lightning, there's no muggers around, it's perfectly peaceful, and you can go play a soccer game in the park. No fear of, but the irrational fear is all outside is dangerous, all outside is lava, stay away from the outside. All outside, you can't even go near it, you can't touch it. That's the irrational side. And that's what the media continually hounds on, is they take something that is a generally prudent thing to do, and they push it to the extreme, and we focus on that because we're looking for danger. And here they are saying, this is danger, and this is not an irrational danger, this is a very rational danger that you should be afraid of, and you should do everything you can to avoid it. And it causes people to do irrational things. And the only reason the media does that is because it's something that they know will grab your attention. And then they get more clicks, and they get more likes, and they get more views, and they make more money. Alright, so I forget. So the positive side to that is knowing that most of the information you're getting about all these scary things and the end of the world is the end of, all of these Armageddon doomsday scenarios. Once you see through what they're doing and you realize, oh, they are exaggerating everything to these fanatical extremes. Once you start seeing that, you start seeing the molehills for the mountains that the news media claims they are. You start seeing them as molehills, little small obstacles, and like, oh, okay. It is very, very encouraging. It has the opposite effect. It's like, that little thing, that's what you're so worried about? Oh, that little stumbling block, that little hurdle? That's what you're going bonkers over? Jump. I'm over it. Alright, move on to the next thing. Hey, I accomplished that thing that was supposed to be this horrible, terrible thing. We've gotten over it. We've gotten past it. We have succeeded. We've overcome. What they portrayed as an impossible obstacle, or as something drastic or something devastating, we have moved past. We have overcome. that's uplifting. That's inspiring. You're like, hey, this thing that everybody else is saying is the end of the world, I got over it, no problem. Everybody's saying that this thing is impossible, and we did it. So that's how you can take something that is meant for evil, is meant for terrible, is meant to cause pain and anxiety, but all it takes just a small change in perspective, and like, that's all it is. Okay, we can handle that. We can get by that. That's all it is. That's what you're afraid of. All right, that's no big deal. That's something we can. That simple change in perspective of what you're actually talking about, or what the actual obstacle is ahead of you, by simply changing your perspective on what it is, not only does it give you the motivation to get through it faster, but it also, like, once you're over it, it is a bragging point. It's something that you're like, hey, we're past it. And then you can look back at it as if it's the end of the world. Like, yeah, we just dodged the end of the world. Woo! Go human race. Go USA. We just avoided certain doom. Like, you can always look back at it as if it was the worst thing possible once it's in the rear view. But